once Peter and John looked into the tomb and saw that it was empty, then all of the words of Jesus came flashing back to them. And then they believed everything that Jesus had said. And in that moment, they believed that Jesus had risen from the dead. But that's not the end of the story. Mary, she had made her way back to the tomb. She had made her way back to the garden where all of the tombs were, and she was so sad. By the way, there's a lot of Marys. This one's Mary Magdalene. There were a whole bunch of Marys. And so Mary, she made her way back to the tomb, and she was so sad. She was so brokenhearted. But then she saw Jesus. She saw Jesus, but she didn't realize it was Jesus. Have you ever, actually, it happens every single Sunday morning almost. If you're here early in the morning when the sun starts shining and you walk in and you look down and somebody's walking in, you can't see who they are because you can only see their silhouette. Every Sunday, people know exactly what I'm talking about. You look down and you see just the silhouette of somebody because the sun is shining so brightly behind them. That is what happened. So Mary went into the tomb, and then there's these two angelic beings there, and she's so confused. I would be confused too, by the way. And then she turned around and she sees this silhouette of someone, but she doesn't really realize that it's Jesus until he says her name. That gets me every time. Until he says her name. Friends, when Jesus says your name, you know it's Jesus. When Jesus says your name, you know that he says it with so much love. When Jesus says your name, you know that he means it more than anybody else in this world, because when Jesus says your name, he means it. And when he said the name of Mary, she knew in that moment, she knew no one would ever love her as much as Jesus. She knew right in that moment that that was Jesus. And all of a sudden, her grief was erased. In that moment, all of her fears vanished. In that moment, her anger dissipated as she saw Jesus alive from the dead. We tell this story every year, and it still doesn't get old. We tell this story every year. And every year, we remind ourselves of the sadness of Friday. And we remind ourselves of the shock and the despair of Saturday. But then we also remind ourselves of the joy of Sunday morning. We remind ourselves of the joy of Sunday morning. And friends, all year long, we come here on every single Sunday. In case you're only here today, I want you to know we are here every single Sunday. So every single Sunday, we come here all year long, and we remind ourselves of the example that Jesus set for us in the Gospels, how he showed us how to live, how he showed us how to care, how he showed us how to pray, how he showed us how to love, and how he showed us how to serve. But today on Easter Sunday, on Resurrection Sunday, we remind ourselves that Jesus is more than the greatest man who ever lived. Yes, was he the greatest man who ever lived? Absolutely. But we remind ourselves today on Easter Sunday, on Resurrection Sunday, that he is more than the greatest man who ever lived. He is more than a great man who lived and died. He is more than that because he is alive. Jesus is alive and present with us, and he redeems us, and he forgives us, and he guides us. Jesus is alive, and he is telling every single one of us that we are worthy of his love, that we are worthy of his salvation, that we are worthy of redemption. Jesus is telling us that the kingdom of heaven awaits for us because he is alive. To quote my heavenly BFF, William Barclay, he said, "Too many of us are looking for Jesus among the dead and not among the living."